everybody. Welcome to DDRC members, staff, and guests. Multiple staff members are present to make sure the meeting runs smoothly and all applicants and citizens are able to communicate with the commission at the appropriate times. If you are here today and would like to speak about a case, please provide your name clearly, speak your name clearly into the microphone, and please be sure to sign in either at the back of the room or at the podium for documentation purposes. If you are here today to speak about a case, you must speak up when the chairperson calls for public comment.
I'll call the roll. Ms. Sims-Branham?
Here.
Mr. Broom?
Here.
Ms. Jaco?
Here.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Here.
And Mr. Salibi?
Here.
We have quorum.
In order to avoid ex parte communications, DDRC members are under strict instructions not to discuss cases under consideration with the public or with each other outside of the public forum. The meeting typically starts with staff calling the case, giving a summary of the project, and then calling the applicant to present if they wish. Decisions are typically made in one evening. Decisions may be appealed within 30 days to a court of competent jurisdiction. Oaths will be administered individually as we hear either from applicants or from live speakers. Applicants with requests before the DDRC are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, case history, and any pertinent meetings held regarding the request. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the DDRC or staff regarding the request. Members of the general public are given the opportunity to address their concerns in intervals of 2 minutes. Applicants may have 5 minutes to respond. Staff has a timer and will make presenters aware of when their time has expired. Are there any changes to the agenda?
We've had one change to the agenda, item number 6 under the historic portion of the agenda. 2123 Pendleton Street, a request for certificate of design approval for construction of a new house in the Old Shandon Lower Waverly Historic District, Area B. Otherwise, the agenda stands.
The DDRC uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the DDRC or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed from the agenda and considered during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda items. Will staff please read the consent agenda?
Certainly. The first item is 1429 Haygood Avenue, a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill in the Melrose Heights Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District. Item 2 is 1202 Haygood Avenue, a request for design approval for an addition in the Melrose Heights Oaklawn Architectural Conservation District. Third item is 1100 Courtright Street, a request for a recommendation for individual landmark designation. This property falls in the North Main Corridor Design Overlay District. Also, 1800 Senate Street is a request for a recommendation for individual landmark designation. This property falls within the University Architectural Conservation District. Item 5 is 1401 Washington Street, a request for design approval for a new sign for an individual landmark. Item 7 is 1213 through 1221 Pickens Street, request for design approval for new construction in the City Center Design Development District. And the last item is 2006 Gervais Street, a request for design approval for changes to an approved design in the 5 Points Urban Design District overlay.
Sorry. Is there anyone from the DDRC that would like any item removed from the consent agenda?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to put 1800 Senate on the regular agenda.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants any other items?
I'd like to move number 8 to regular agenda. 2006 Gervais Street.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda? Okay. All right, do I have a motion and a second to remove items 4 and 8 off the consent agenda and onto the regular agenda?
We need to move that as,
Need a motion, and yes, we're going to have to approve to remove it off the consent agenda, and then we'll be coming back around to the consent agenda as amended.
I'll make a motion to amend the consent agenda, removing items 4, dealing with the property at 1800 Senate Street, and item 8, dealing with the property at 2006 Gervais Street from the consent agenda, and otherwise to approve the consent agenda as amended.
second?
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Sims Branham?
Yes.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes.
And Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
The motion passes.
I think we just about captured everything on that except approval of the April minutes. So
Yes.
I will just now ask for another motion and second to confirm our new advised consent agenda along with the April minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Sims Branham?
Yes.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes.
And Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. So I guess we will then move on to the new regular agenda and item 4 first.
So this is a request for a landmark of, or individual landmark designation in the University Conservation District for 1800 Senate Street, which is also known as the Hampton House Apartments. Okay. The Hampton House Apartments is requesting a landmark certification because this is in a protected historic district in the University Overlay District, but it is not in the contributing period of time of significance. It was completed in 1965, which is outside the period of significance. And so even though it is in a district, it does not have that historic protection. And in particular, the applicant is seeking to have this landmark status so that they can then apply for the Bailey Bill and be able to use the Bailey Bill to further protect the building and to make upgrades that are needed to the site. The Hampton House is significant for several reasons because this is a mid-century modern structure completed in 1965, and it is very much intact to the style that it was at the time of construction. The newspaper ads announcing its completion show these photographs of the building that have almost all of the original details still in place as what is there today, and it is listed as having won a prize for being fully electrified, having a lot of amenities that would have been new for the time, and having those abilities to provide that. It's also significant because there is pressure for preserving these mid-century modern buildings, specifically in the University District. These photographs show some of the other mid-century modern buildings that are there, and at the time of creation of this district, it was one of our first districts or areas of protection. These buildings were not considered to be contributing or significant. As time has moved on and architectural historians have come to appreciate this style, these are getting more recognition and being appreciated and also meeting the time period requirements for being considered a historic building. Now the character of the neighborhood is really defined by this mix between older historic buildings and the newer mid-century modern structures. The photograph on the right is showing one of these early 20th century houses mixed with two other types of modern style construction that are there in the district and part of the character of the neighborhood. Another consideration is the site where this was built. This is built on the site of the former Hampton House, as it was called. It was the last home of General Wade Hampton III. It's significant because the way that this site was memorialized was very much in keeping with perpetuating the lost cause narrative. And this is a narrative that was proclaiming that the Confederacy was in the right during the cause for the Civil War and that the objectives that they were trying to achieve were admirable. General Wade Hampton III was impoverished in his last years of life, and he lost his house. The citizens of South Carolina put on an award ceremony, or rather a fundraising drive, to be able to raise the funds to build a house for him so that he could retire in comfort and that they could admire the general and give him this recognition. So that house was built there in 1899, and the general lived there for about 3 years until he died. And even though it was such a brief period of time of what the site was used for, it has been memorialized in this historical marker that you see here. That was put up in 1936, which is also a time that coincided with the funding of the NAACP in South Carolina and other early civil rights movements. So there was a pushback to advocate for this lost cause narrative in light of civil rights activities that were happening then. And then the house was torn down to be able to build the apartment building in 1965, which carried on with the name of Wade Hampton, or the Hampton House. And of course, 1965 is the height of the civil rights movement. So there were also a lot of these efforts being made at the time as opposition to the civil rights movement that was happening. So the site has significance in addition to the building that is there today.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner Ledecker, I'm going to turn it over to you for whatever concerns you want addressed. Make sure, is your microphone on?
Sorry? I will start by saying I think the property does merit designation as a city landmark, but I do have some questions about the application of the individual criteria. One thing that I thought, and you kept using the word site over and over again in the narrative, and criterion 5 for the landmark designation is that it's a site associated with an important person or event in the history. So I would urge you to consider criterion 5 for the reasons that Wade Hampton lived there. It was built by the supporters of the Lost Cause. And there's a lot of other history. You mentioned the civil rights movement, but one of the other elements of the neighborhood history that struck me when I read the National Register nomination was that as the university expanded into this neighborhood, something like 7 blocks and 120 individual buildings were lost. And that led to a lot of neighborhood pushback. Ultimately, the University Neighborhood Association was formed. And that was one of the seeds, I think, for historic preservation in Columbia. So I think those are sort of important with the site that I think probably should be brought out, if you could, in the narrative. One of the other things that struck me about it was I was looking at the property and said, why does this have this odd L shape? The original lot where Wade Hampton lived was just a corner lot, and apparently what happened was there's actually 2 lots. There's 1010 Barnwell and 1800 Senate. They got combined into this. 2 buildings were destroyed, the Hampton House and a residential structure on 1010 Barnwell, in order to build this 8-story apartment and a parking lot. So I think that sort of ties into the broader neighborhood narrative, the birth of historic preservation movement in Columbia. That's just a point that, you know, you might add into the narrative, but I really think that criterion 5 is key, since we're using the word site over and over again, even though any remains of Wade Hampton's mansion or his occupation would probably exist only in the archaeological record, but if so, they're no less tangible than the building that's above ground. I also had a little, I don't know, eye roll moment looking at criterion 3, which indicates that we should give consideration to this property because it's representative of a building type that's threatened with extinction. And I read, you know, Stacy Ritchie's 2020 survey. There's a lot of information about mid-century modern. I didn't get any indication that these buildings are threatened with extinction or they're disappearing or anything. So I thought criterion 3 was just kind of, oh, let's throw it in there and get a sympathy vote. But I don't think it really applies unless you have some data or information that apartment buildings from the 1960s in the mid-MCM style are disappearing. I would, forget that one.
So if I'm understanding, and you want to expand on the reasons
I
why to
would-
make it a
I
landmark
would-
status?
I would
Okay, no.
definitely advocate for landmark status.
For more reasons, yeah.
More
Understood.
reasons and less criteria. Criterion 3, we have shotgun houses, we have workers' housing. Try to find an industrial site that's left in Columbia. Those, to me, are the endangered resources in Columbia, not mid-century modern houses. Now, I want to make a point about the MCM. I do like the building. I think it's a really nifty building. But in my limited research about this style, one thing that pops out is that the architects were attempting to bridge the gap between indoor and outdoor spaces. And when I look at the building, I see the belt course above the first floor, the concrete belt course, and then you have these 4 corner balconies. All the 4, they seem to be like extensions of the floor plate, which sort of gives the idea, to me at least, that the floor plate is penetrating the walls, breaking down the boundary between indoor and outdoor. So, and the roof line on the flat roof, it echoes the same sort of pattern. So I think it emphasizes that breaking of the boundaries between indoor and outdoor space, which at your leisure you could incorporate into the nomination should a motion pass. So that's all I have to say about it. I can make a motion
Okay,
to.
yeah, well, let me just ask a question. Does staff have any response to the points that were raised?
No, I am in agreement with adding number 5 to that. I think that this does fit that. I think for whether it's being threatened, the reason that we put that on there is because it doesn't have any current protection right now in the state that it's in. And this building has been for sale for a while. And we'd had several phone calls of people asking if they'd be allowed to paint it or if they'd be allowed to alter it in other ways. So even though it hasn't happened yet or hasn't been applied for, we've heard that people are interested in making modifications to the building. And that would be allowed to happen if there wasn't this landmark protection there.
Thank you.
And can I clarify too? I'm assuming that there are other cases where mid-century modern has been entered into this same landmark kind of designation for that very reason, because I see quite a few around Columbia that I'd love to keep, and I know they're probably in protection areas because of that factor, because they're in that
Yes, that's
style
correct.
of mid-century modern.
And the report that Mr. Liedecker was referring to is advocating for several more buildings in the downtown area to get landmark status because there are big districts of the downtown area that don't have that protection.
Thank you. Probably format-wise, we need to open up to any public comment, right? Yeah. Does anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? Okay. Am I ignoring the correct slides or yeah, advance? Yes. All right. I'm gonna open it up for a motion in a second.
I'm assuming we can make a motion to approve with conditions, the same way we approve other projects?
Correct. Yep. And you can read what's already there and just add where you want it.
Okay.
Yes.
I will move to approve sending the landmark application to City Council for final designation as a Level 3 landmark for the 1800 Senate Street property, TMS 11405-15-01, AKA Hampton House Apartment Building, with the following conditions: that the staff revisit the landmark application, specifically to revisit the use of landmark criterion 3, address how the property can be viewed as a site that's significant under criterion 5, use any readily available sources to develop the historic context for the 60s and the 70s in the University Hill neighborhood, the City of Columbia, and the broader national history. amplify the discussion of how the building reflects MCM design principles. All of their details deferred to staff.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a clarification.
Yeah, I've got a modification on that, but what, do you want to tell me? what
I have a
clarification?
clarification on the motion. You're not suggesting that it needs to come back before council, before DDRC to look at the modifications, correct? You're just saying
Right, I
that the
don't wanna-
staff needs to address them.
Slow the trajectory. I
Okay.
just want to be sure, before it goes to council, that some of these issues at the staff discretion are addressed.
Okay, so we had a motion and we had a second. My modification to your motion, and I was fine with your motion, is we're agreeing to giving the designations a landmark status. To me, it wasn't so much of taking out what had been done, replacing it, it was more enhancing and adding to the information that has already been provided to address the concerns that Mr. Lee Decker has brought up. That is my modification motion. Does that make sense? Okay, all right, can I get a second on that?
Second.
All right, there you go.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Sims Branham?
Yes.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes?
And Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, exciting. All right, item 8, 2006 Gervais Street.
So this case at 2006 Gervais Street, this is a car wash building in the Five Points Design Overlay District. This proposal came before the DDRC in November of '22 and received approval. The proposal included some changes from the standard design to better fit into the Five Points Overlay District. And by standard, I mean this is a chain that's built all over the United States, so they came with their standard design. They made some modifications to try to fit better into the district guidelines. One of those changes was to not do the bright blue metal roof that they typically do, and to do, they had suggested shingles on the two end pieces. Let me go back to the slides. So they could basically, what was at the top is what was approved by the DDRC. It was shingled roofs on the visible portions. Staff went to the final inspection for the property and found that they had installed the blue roofs. I think it was just an error between the contractor and the design team because, they do these all over the place and somehow it just wasn't properly communicated. So at that time, there was a discussion about how to come into compliance. It was either replace with the roof that was approved, which is shingle. They had recommended painting the standing seam metal roof, the brown color that you see on the slide. And so our understanding is with the proper type of paint and the proper prep for that material that it can be successfully done. So the staff recommendation was to approve that modification to come into compliance with the understanding that if the paint didn't hold up over time, that they would be in violation and have to come back for a different, solution to that. So, and our understanding is, and I know Amy's dealt with projects before where metal roofs like that have been painted successfully. So I didn't really have much experience with that, but apparently it can be done and the contractor feels confident. So that was the staff recommendation, rather than replacing it with the shingles.
Okay, all right, then how about Commissioner Broom, you want to express your questions?
Well, design-wise, I'm looking at the original approval. Number one, it looks like windows on 5 bays facing Gervais Street. And I think that's open, I believe, for ventilation. That's missing the lattice work or the frame of those 5 bays. They were missing. You got them upstairs on
Well, they're just open. They're
yeah,
open.
It need to be open, but you need more architectural feature in those openings, as shown on the first rendering.
Well, they're roll-up doors,
Roll-up doors?
or they can come down. They're just
Garage
open in the
doors?
picture.
Yes,
So they were installed
That's-
properly. Yep.
Good, that's good. And you had mentioned about the metal roof, about maybe paint it to the color as proposed. Did you say that paint may not hold up?
Well, that was the concern that staff had when they proposed painting the metal roof, was, is it going to hold up? And apparently there are particular types of paint that have been recommended, and there's a specification in your packet.
Sherwin-Williams.
Right, that apparently it works very well. And so the request or the suggestion from staff was that we approve it with the understanding that if it doesn't hold up, that they will need to come back. So that's, and I mean, there are other examples apparently of where these types of roofs have been painted successfully.
Well, I personally believe that the metal roof is a much better application than the shingle. And as far as the color goes, to me, you got that Shell station next door. You got Cookout in that same block. Really, the color doesn't bother me that much. I just don't want it to, I'm not sure and comfortable with the paint.
Well, just to respond to the examples, the Shell station, of course, was built before we had a design overlay district. The Cookout does have some canopies that have accent colors, but it's not like a wholesale, like bright colored roof. So in terms of the design guidelines, doing a brightly colored standing seam roof was not considered to be in keeping with the contributing buildings in that design district. So the staff recommendation was not to do the blue roof. I mean, if obviously the DDRC disagrees, but this is, the top was what was approved, by the commission in 2022, was to, and whether it be shingles, we had recommended doing a brown standing seam roof at the time, thinking that was a better fit as well for a commercial building, but the shingles are also seen in commercial buildings in the district, so it was acceptable. That was what they chose to do at the time, and it was approved. But now painting that roof to just be a color that's more compatible with the building is what is recommended, but that's for y'all to decide.
Yeah, so just as a counterpoint, I remember approving this design, and I liked the fact that the roof was less of a vibrant color, and that we knew its function, but that it was going to be subdued a bit with the color, whether it was a shingle or standing seam, that it was more in the brown family and not blue. So we already approved that, and so I feel like we should keep with that approval and not go back to change it. And as long as the client is, or the owner is willing to change the color, and again, I like the stipulation. I'm not as familiar with going back and painting over an anodized standing seam roof, but if it works, great. If it doesn't, then yes, I think they need to adhere to the guidelines that we approved back in 2022.
Thank you. Any other comments? You good? Yeah?
Well said.
All right. All right. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this case? All right. I'm just marching forward without my cue cards, but at this point, I would open up for a motion in a second.
I'd like to move that we approve 2006 Gervais Street for their request for certificate of design approval for the changes approved to the design per the list, per the guidelines listed by the staff, where I'm not sure I have those. Let me see. Staff recommends with the approval that request, with the understanding that if the paint becomes a maintenance issue, additional measures will be required to come into compliance.
Second.
Mr. Broom?
Yes.
Ms. Sims Branham?
Yes.
Ms. Jaco?
Yes.
Mr. Lee Decker?
Yes.
And Mr. Salibi?
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right. Is there any other business this evening?
We just continue on in Preservation Month. We did, as usual, do our Mabel Payne Award winner. For those of y'all who may not know, Mabel Payne was a civil servant with the city doing early preservation work. And our winner this year was Todd Avant from Avant Holdings. Todd's done a number of historic buildings, and he is such a joy to work with because he really cares about the building, the details, getting it right. And he's done enough work to make a significant impact in the city. So we were really pleased to present that to him. And then we're moving forward with other preservation activities. We have a meet and greet this week, next week. Brick repointing next week as well. Preservation bike ride of Columbia's green sites, Green Book sites on Sunday, and a children's craft activity at the library on Saturday. So there's a lot going on. Staff is pulling a lot of hours doing the work. And so anyway, it's going well. Y'all want to add anything?
All right, well, great. Yeah, I've seen the post and stuff, so that's been great.
Yeah, I'd like to just say thank you to the staff for the extra hours on such an important week, and I know there are a lot of people participating, so bravo.
Yeah. All right, any other business? Good, all right. Well, we have a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
You'll
Second.
Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.